our indices for P and K have been rising, better than they were in the past since we started doing the likes of min-tilling and cover cropping. No one thing is the answer to that, but when all these things are combined, we're holding on to nutrients far better. Therefore, they're not ending up in watercourses, they're ending up in our crops and with following crops over years and are not costing us money.
Tillage farms often face criticism for their use of plant protection products. However, tillage farmers are highly environmentally conscious, not only for the environmental reasons, but also because precision and careful use of inputs are essential for controlling costs. Farmers apply only what is needed and as accurately as possible. You are listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Teagasc and FBD ran the Environmental Sustainability Competition throughout 2025 and the results were announced a couple of weeks ago. Don Summers, a Wexford farmer and regular contributor to this podcast, won the overall award against strong competition from dry stock, dairy and organic farmers. Don and his tillage advisor John Pettit sat down recently with Mark Gibson and Siobhan Kavanagh from Teagasc on the Signpost webinar to discuss Don's farm and his sustainability practices. This was a terrific interview and well worth listening to. We joined the conversation as Don was commenting on how much the award meant to him and his family.
It's far more significant than I ever expected it to be. To be honest, I never expected to be sitting here as the award winner when I filled out the application form. I don't know why I did it, but I just did it. But yeah, since the awards, I've been shocked and pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that congratulated me, but also my family, but my parents, my uncle who I farm with, my son who's in the local school. He came in from school the following day after the awards and his class had made him a card for me saying congratulations, and all the pupils and the teachers had signed it. And it was really personally significant to me to see how the local kids had a sense of pride that one of their local people had won an award. So yeah, it has been made massively significant to me.
Brilliant. And it's great to see those images and that pride, as you say there, because it is so important that it's important to recognise the really good work that you have been doing over the years.
I think a lot every farmer is doing good work, but very few of us get recognised for the work we're doing. So it does mean a lot to have that effort recognised.
And could you tell us about what has motivated you, Don, to go down this path of more sustainability, or focusing on the sustainability, and obviously there's the economic dimension there to that also? Yeah,
well, as a farmer, and particularly a tillage farmer, most of what happens on my farm is out of my control. It's down to the weather. So we're completely influenced by the weather and the climate. There's only maybe 10 or 15% of it we can control. The rest of it's down to weather. So we're affected by climate, and it would be naive of me to think that what I do on my farm will have no impact. I have to be prepared to do something, and that was part of the reason. But there's none of the measures I do on my farm that were done purely for environmental reasons. All of the things that I do on my farm are they're motivated by a financial benefit and have an environmental benefit too, but there's nothing that's costing me money. They all have a small or a medium or large cost or economic benefit to my farm. So it's important that if I try doing something that's environmentally sustainable, that it's not leaving me out of pocket, or that I am financially worse off as a result, because at the end of the day, it is a business. I do need to make a living, and if I want to continue to do this and continue to farm in an environmentally sustainable way, I have to be doing it in a financially sustainable way.
Great. Well, we're going to pick up on more of those points in our discussion a little later on. Now we're delighted to be joined by Don's Teagasc advisor, John Pettit, who's going to tell us about the important practices that Don has implemented on his farm that are making a real difference to the local environment. John.
Thanks, Mark. Firstly, I'd like to recognise the contribution of my colleague John Mann to the presentation, who's Signpost Tillage Advisor. So Don Summers, then Don's farm profile. Don farms 183 hectares collaboratively with his uncle Jim in a village called Aldgate, which is roughly 10 kilometres south of Enniscorthy in Wexford. All the land farmed is within an 8-kilometre radius of Oilgate. There's a mix of winter and spring crops grown on the farm. So crops include winter oilseed rape, winter wheat, winter barley, winter oats, spring beans, spring barley and spring oats. Don has been min-tilling with a tine cultivator since 2018. And again, there's a major focus with Don on soil health and nutrient use efficiency. Improving water quality on the farm. So there's a big focus on, first of all, retaining nutrients on the farm. Right? So buffer zones are widely used on the farm, so where they're required, they're implemented. So you're preventing the loss of phosphorus and sediment to drains and ultimately to water bodies. There's also catch crops drilled on the farm. So 100% of the area destined for spring cropping will be catch cropped. A catch crop essentially ensures that nitrogen is uptaken from the soil and it's less prone to being lost to groundwater and surface waterways as well. Again, there's a major focus on the farm on soil health. Soil health can be directly linked to water quality itself, right? So a healthy soil poses less of a threat to water quality, right? In that you're less inclined to have sediment loss, less inclined to have phosphorus losses to water bodies, and also nitrogen will be better utilised because the yield potential of crops is greater as well. So to improve soil health, the things that Don has implemented on the farm, 50% of the cropped area on the farm, the straw is actually chopped on it, right? So it's reincorporated back into the soil, adding carbon and organic matter back to the soil. On the other side then, Don in recent years has started to import manures. So again, manures are a very valuable nutrient source that allows them to avail of a valuable nutrient source while also saving money. But organic manures at the same time as well, they also improve soil health in that they're a valuable food source for microorganisms, earthworms and whatnot in our soils. Catch crops as well improve soil health. So you've got a plant that literally is like an umbrella over your soil. You don't have the same rain impact, you have less soil slumping, soils are easier to cultivate come the springtime. But more importantly, you're actually adding a valuable source of carbon back to soils as well and increasing the overall soil carbon pool. Minimising soil compaction. So again, when soils are due to be cultivated, whether it's for a winter or a spring crop, Don will not go into a field until such time as the soil is fit to be cultivated. So he makes every effort to ensure that he doesn't have a negative impact on soil structure. Right? At the same time as well, Don also has permanent tram lines on the farm. So with the use of GPS, he's able to use that his tram lines are in the same position within the field every year. So you're minimising the amount of compaction that occurs across the field. Don also, as I previously mentioned, since 2018, is actually min-tilling with a tine cultivator. And again, that brings its own benefits to soil structure as well. On the other side, when it comes to water quality as well, integrated pest management makes its own contribution, or IPM makes its own contribution to water quality as well. Right? So again, we don't want to see pesticides in water courses. So Don, at the same time as well, he will minimise the use of pesticides, so they're only used strictly where they're required. Right? And again, I suppose on the other side of it then as well, if you're to look at the likes of when you're applying nutrients, whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus or potash, Don has a targeted application approach with those same nutrients. So just further elaborating on that, I suppose the first step when it comes to a targeted nutrient application approach, the first step with Don is yield mapping. So Don has the facility on his combine where he's able to yield map. So within a given field, you can see where a given crop has yielded well, where it may have not yielded as well or yielded may have yielded poorly. So you can ask the question then, why has that crop not yielded as well in that given area? That could be a soil structural issue, but it could be just as easily, it could be a nutrient issue. So the pH in that part of the field may be low. So yield mapping enables us to look at given parts of the field and ask the question why they're not yielding as well. And you can go in then, you can target soil samples. So you can soil sample that area, and in some cases it may have come back that the pH was lower in that area. In some cases, it may have come back that a P level might have been a little bit lower in that area, and you can adjust it then thereafter. I suppose the next step in the targeted nutrient application process is formulating a nutrient management plan itself, right? And within that plan, you account for the likes of the given crops, NP and K offtake. You look at obviously consider as well the potential yield and what the offtake is going to be. But thereafter, you'll also consider the soil's ability to provide nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash to that given crop, and formulate a plan then in terms of how much, let it be organic or inorganic, NP and K is going to be applied to the crop thereafter. Again, any organic manures that are brought on farm as well, right, are all tested. So we know exactly what we're dealing with, right? So we know the quantity of nitrogen, phosphorus and potash present in the organic manure, right? So when we say we want to put on, for example, 35 units of P, we're putting on exactly 35 units of P, or 40 kilograms per hectare of P. Targeted application technologies then. So this is, I suppose, a big focus with Don has been in recent years. So again, GPS and weight sector technologies are used while spreading both organic manures and chemical fertilisers. So it ensures that the fertiliser, the exact rate is applied on a per hectare basis, but it's spread evenly over the same hectare. Precision placement of chemical fertiliser while drilling crops as well. So Don has the ability to place fertiliser, but particularly phosphorus, while drilling crops. So on index 1s and 2s, right, by placing phosphorus, it ensures that phosphorus is utilised more efficiently, right? That drives yield potential. By driving yield potential, it automatically means that nitrogen is utilised more efficiently. So there's a gain for both phosphorus and nitrogen with the same technology. Nitrogen sensor technology and the ability to variable rate spread as well. So Don has been lucky in that he's had access to a Yara N sensor. The same sensor has the ability to scan or measure the amount of nitrogen present in the crop, right? It can also scan and measure the biomass present in the crop, right? And between the two then, it adjusts the nitrogen application rate accordingly, right, over the field. So again, you're using your nitrogen more efficiently on the farm. I suppose aside of water quality as well, there's been a big focus on improving biodiversity on the farm, right? And I suppose the two go hand in hand, both biodiversity and water quality themselves, right? So again, I suppose the first step, improving biodiversity is a diverse crop rotation. So Don has a range of crops, right, that offer benefits to, let it be birds, insects, invertebrates and whatnot, right? At the same time, like when we think about biodiversity, we mainly focus above ground, but a diverse crop rotation offers so much more to the soil biome and microbes in soil. So a diverse crop rotation offers multiple benefits, right? Planting broadleaf trees. So in recent years, Don has planted an extensive amount of broadleaf trees, which offer obvious benefits, right? Buffer margins as well, as I've mentioned that Don implements buffer margins, right? Buffer margins offer a habitat for microbial life, right? For invertebrates, mice and whatnot. And they also act as nature corridors. So they offer an awful lot more just than traps for overland flow of phosphorus and sediment. Catch crops as well. Catch crops offer shelter for birds over winter. They offer a food source, right, both for birds, insects, microbial life as well when they're reincorporated back into soil. So they offer multiple benefits as well. Applying organic manures. Organic manures themselves are an energy source for microbial life within soil. So once they're incorporated back in, microbial life has a food source, right? So it drives a more healthy and diverse soil microbiome. Escape hedgerow management as well. So Don has a tendency to let hedgerows grow and mature and just trims their sides. That offers obvious benefits for birds in terms of nesting opportunities and also a food source as well. And I suppose finally, one that we don't focus on that often is integrated pest management, or IPM. Since 2015, Don has not applied any insecticides whatsoever on the farm. And again, I suppose Don he only applies a given pesticide once it's warranted, right? So again, you're minimizing the opportunity to have an adverse effect on the environment. Thank you. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, John. And a reminder once again that you can interact with us live here in studio using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And a recording of today's webinar will be available on the Teagasc YouTube channel in the coming days, and a podcast version will be available on all of the popular podcast platforms. And John now joins us here at the panel. John, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Mark.
John, I know yourself and Don have had a long-standing relationship, which I only discovered this morning. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I suppose my career started in Teagasc in the year 2000. So I started in Teagasc Kildalton as a lecturer, and I suppose the first crop of students that I actually dealt with, Don was actually one of them. So I dealt with Don from his initial days in Kildalton right through to the present day. So, yeah.
Very good. So Don, would you call John an inspirational figure in your life? Would that be going too far?
He would have been. From the day I went to Kildalton. As I said, John has been an advisor and someone I can, has taught me a lot about farming, but has also been there to, bounce ideas off of, or if I say to John I'm going to try something, he might sometimes tell me, no, I'm mad to try that, and he might sometimes, throw out the economic upsides and downsides and other benefits of doing, or, potential pitfalls. So, he's always been there. As I said, just the way it happened that I went to Kildalton, and then after I left Kildalton, he ended up becoming a local Teagasc advisor, and so as I said, I've known him for a long time, but he's a good resource to have on my side.
So, John, obviously Don has been doing a lot of things right on his farm. Could you talk to us through the various practices that Don has implemented over the years? What have your observations been in terms of Don's determination to improve the sustainability of his own farm? Just to be interested in your own observations.
I suppose Don as an individual, I'd say the one good thing about Don is, as an advisor, he's always willing to challenge you. He'll come to you with questions. Sometimes you may not always have the answers for him. Sometimes we have what I would refer to as healthy debates. We don't always agree. And there's a learning process in that as well. That's hugely important as well. We don't always have to agree. And I suppose most importantly, we have to challenge one another as well. So there's benefits for Don in that, but there's also benefits for me as well as an advisor, and me developing my own knowledge base and skills as well. I suppose Don is never afraid to ask the question, what can I do better? What should I be doing? Is there something that I should be doing or looking at? And I suppose this is a conversation we've had over years, and Don would have had implemented Mintill. I suppose our organic manures would have been brought on board in recent years, and we broke it down, looked at the financial benefit of everything as well. So Don earlier on alluded to the fact that everything is looked at from a financial perspective as well, and it has to make financial sense. So every move you take when it comes to business, and that's not just farming business, it's any business, it has to make financial sense as well.
It's very useful to, I'm part of a discussion group with John, and I'm also doing a profit monitor through John, so the other farmers that he's doing, to be able to compare how I'm doing to other farmers in my area is very useful, because I know then if I am deciding to do something, be it cover cropping or chopping my straw, financially what is the impact of that on my farm. And once I know that there's no negative financial impact, sometimes there's a positive financial impact, but knowing that means you can make better decisions, more informed decisions, and know what is it costing me or what is it bringing to the table economically, not just environmentally. I mean, sometimes the environmental things can be overstated, sometimes they can be understated, but it's easy to make a decision or to continue to do a practice once you know it's not costing me money. You to do an environmental practice or an environmentally beneficial practice once I know it's not costing me money, because ultimately I have to be able to stay in business.
And Don, you mentioned earlier on that you had done your training in Kildalton as a young farmer. How do you keep yourself up to date with all of the developments? There's continuous evolutions in technology and practices. How do you find the best way to keep yourself tuned in?
There's loads of resources out there. I mean, you could be looking at something on YouTube or something like that, but often they're given to you by a vested interest, so the person selling the product. I find the best way to learn is from other farmers, be it through a discussion group, going on a farm walk. Just, farmers love talking about farming. You'll always meet a farmer somewhere and you'll get chatting to them. I've learned a lot through being part of the Signpost scheme, because I've been, going to different events, meeting other farmers, and you can always pick up something from them. You mightn't agree with what they're doing, you might think they're doing it differently, but if you keep an open mind, you can always get something from it, some practice or some thing they're doing on their farm that you can take home and try it, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But I think farmer to farmer is where I've got more education than any other resource.
Mm-hmm. And Siobhan, what were the standout messages that you see coming from Don's farm for that other farmers could learn from?
Yeah, and I suppose the standout things for Don, for us, were firstly, Don knows why he's doing what he's doing. He's a really good understanding of how you use nutrients, how nutrients might end up in the waterways. Like we were talking about the pip maps earlier on, and you were saying the pip maps really reflect what's happening in your farm. So I think Don has a really good understanding. That has to help to adopt the technology if you understand why you're doing it. Like you mentioned when we were preparing for this about nutrients ending up in the water. Well, if nutrients end up in the water, that's no use to your farm from a crop growth point of view or a profitability point of view. So that understanding is so important. And I think Don is capable of pivoting and changing and adjusting the system, and is quite flexible. You talked about having a nutrient management plan, but you're able to adjust that nutrient management plan, aren't you? Depending on when you get crops into the ground and adjust nitrogen rates. We
would make a plan early in the year, but the growing year can change. You can have a wetter season, or we might make a nutrient management plan based on sowing spring barley on the 20th of March. But you mightn't sow it to the 1st of May. Once you sow it on the 1st of May, its yield potential has dropped. So we'll kind of have a figure for, say, total nitrogen applied and when it's applied based on 3 different scenarios. And as the year goes on, we can move to different scenarios. Or I might just ring John and say, John, I'm thinking, this crop of winter wheat's doing really well this year. Should I increase the nitrogen applied? But decisions like that are based on yield potential. But what I can see in the field, I'm looking at my historic yield maps where I know that field has always yielded well, and I can make adjustments on the fly. It's a conversation. It doesn't stop. This is the plan. We're sticking to it. It evolves throughout the year. Yeah.
And I think importantly, like John put up a huge amount that Don is doing, and some people might be looking at that and go, "There's a lot there." Like it's about breaking that down and identifying the 2 or 3 key things that you might start off with in your farm. And that came across from all the finalists over the last 2 years: is to start small, pick something, and focus on 2 or 3 things, not try to do everything that maybe Don is doing. Precision farming mightn't be for everybody. Like it takes a particular skill to adopt those technologies. It could be as simple as what you're doing, taking out the spade and assessing your soil health. So it's identifying a couple of small things, and what came across really strongly was surrounding yourself with positive people and learning from other farmers. So getting involved in a discussion group. Like our winners from last year, John and Brendan Walsh, they've done a really good job with clover. And they found from being in a clover discussion group gave them the confidence to reduce nitrogen on those swards. So it's the discussion groups, it's learning from other farmers. We know from research that learning from other farmers and visiting farms like Don's are so important, but it's starting small and identifying a couple of key actions I think is important.
I think what Siobhan said there about picking something small, pick something small, and when you're confident that you are implementing that well, add another layer, add another layer. Like I didn't start out where I am. It's been a journey over a number of years. I'm far from at the end of that journey, but by keeping adding other layers, and you'll have to tweak the plan and work it. But start small, but it constantly evolves and improves then.
Siobhan alluded to the PIP maps, or pollution impact potential maps, which are available to all farmers for free on the I think it's the EPA website, but also through the Teagasc Nutrient Management Planning Programme as well. And you were telling me earlier how accurate you thought that those maps were for your own farm. Yeah,
my ASIP advisor came out and we were having a conversation about water quality and the things that I'm doing on my farm, and he produced these PIP maps, and I didn't know what's a PIP map. It's a pollution impact potential, but he showed me the maps, big A3 maps or whatever, or sorry, A2 maps, and I was a bit skeptical at first, but when I saw the pathways that water, when it kind of zoomed in on my fields, they were surprisingly accurate, and as far as I know, these were done up a number of years ago, a good number of years ago. But it did highlight to me, if the water is leaving my farm via this way, well, if I can install a grass margin here to slow down the flow of water and let the nutrients and the sediment settle here, they're not ending up in a watercourse, but they're also still in my field. As Siobhan said earlier, I think it was all the nutrients that leave my fields and end up in a watercourse, they're very expensive, and if they're not in my field, I have to replace them at a cost. So if a catch crop can hold on to nutrients, they mightn't all be available for the current crop, but at least they're still in my field. I'm building soil fertility. I have noticed that from soil sampling for the last 20-something years that I've been doing and my father was doing previously, our indices for P and K have been rising better than they were in the past since we started doing the likes of min-tilling and cover cropping. No one thing is the answer to that, but when all these things are combined, we're holding on to nutrients far better. Therefore, they're not ending up in watercourses, they're ending up in our crops and the following crops over years and are not costing us money.
So it sounds like you're really building a wealth of data on your farm and being able to observe those trends over time as well.
Yeah, we have. There's loads of technology out there, and I mean, particularly tillage farmers were guilty of taking all the option boxes when we're ordering a machine or buying a machine. And there's tools and stuff that's on machinery, whether it's yield mapping on a combine or variable rate spreading on a fertiliser. A lot of farms will have these technologies already there. It can be a little bit scary to take the first step to using them, but I mean, I remember someone telling me years ago that if you're not measuring something, you can't save it. So by measuring what's coming off particular parts of the field, I can see, if a high yielding part of the field warrants putting extra fertiliser on it, extra nitrogen on it. If there's a low yielding part of the field, if a soil test shows it's not a nutrient deficiency, it's just a natural restraint, whether it's the soil type or whether it's shaded. I mean, there's no point. Extra fertiliser won't solve the problem if it's not a nutrient deficiency. So reduce the fertiliser where it can't be used, apply it where it can be used, and by doing that, like, we are saving on fertiliser costs. In some ways, the technology itself won't necessarily be paid for by the savings in fertiliser. That's where I've availed of the likes of TAMS grants and things like that have made this technology affordable. And then if you invest money in something, you're going to find a way to use it. So I've invested the money in it. I'm trying to get the most out of it to get the most I can back from it.
Fantastic. We have some questions coming in from our audience. John, if I could ask you, first of all, a question here in relation to catch crops. Do they result in a requirement to plough rather than min-till, or how does it fit with that ambition to reduce the amount of tillage on the farm?
I suppose a lot of the larger scale arable farmers at this stage are min-tilling. If you grow a catch crop, it doesn't mean that you're confined to one given cultivation system. Let that be plough based or let that be min-till with a tine cultivator. Like, obviously a plough it's an awful lot easier to bury trash with a plough, right? If you've got a very large cover crop, you may need to do certain things prior to actually cultivating it with your tine cultivator. You may need to mulch it, it may need to be broken down in some shape or form with a disc before you go in with a tine cultivator. So look, at growing a catch crop doesn't restrict the cultivation practice that you use, whether let that be plough based or let that be min-till with a tine cultivator.
I would argue that it actually opens up more opportunities. In some fields I've sowed cover crops and drilled directly into that cover crop with no cultivation whatsoever. I've tried going into cover crop where I've used mechanical destruction, so like a disc harrow to just chop it down and drill straight in behind that. And those practices wouldn't have been possible without that cover crop being there, because the living soil, by having a cover crop growing in it, it requires less cultivation then. So as the roots of the cover crop die off, those root channels are occupied by the new crop, so it reduces the need for cultivation. So I mean, it opened up the opportunity to try no-till or reduced cultivations by having those cover crops there. So I'd say they give more opportunities to try things rather than restricting the practices that you're going to do.
We have many of our viewers admiring the wonderful hedgerows that you have on your farm, but wondering, do these impact on yield, or is that ever a concern for you? And what can farmers learn from this? Because often we drive across the country, through the countryside in Ireland, and maybe see hedges overly manicured at many parts around the place.
Yeah, well, we limit our, I suppose, for want of a better term, well manicured hedges for roadsides, where it's a safety issue. You can't have, overgrown hedges. They're restricting visibility. They're making it hard for vehicles to get by. I was in the unfortunate situation where I had to remove 17 ash trees from a roadside this year. That were all dead with ash dieback, so there was a safety issue there. But out in our fields where there's not a safety issue, we try to let the hedgerows grow up as much as possible, let the sides fill out to the point where they're not impeding machinery in the field, they're not getting caught in sowers and cultivators and sprayers and making life difficult, but as much as possible, let them get as big and bulky as possible. And we have a couple of parts of the farm that will be just not commercially productive. They don't pay for themselves, and we just leave them to themselves. On my BIS application, 17% of my farm is classified as areas for nature. So if there's hedgerows don't impact economically or financially on my farm, they bring more to it. They provide shelter, they provide a habitat. They don't have any negative impact on it.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, there is a perception that on tillage farms that the biodiversity is lower, and maybe it is to a point, because generally field sizes are higher, are bigger, so you have less hedgerows and that. But our winner actually for the biodiversity award this year was Tom Tierney, who's a tillage farmer above in Kildare, and some of the things he's doing is a bit like Don. He has a lot of tree line hedges, and topped hedges, but he has forestry, he's putting in margins, so there is capacity on tillage farms. I think he's about 24% space for nature, but there is capacity to allow hedges to grow up, to have that biodiversity. Even though field sizes are larger, there is capacity there.
I suppose as well, on top of that as well, if you're to look at the benefits, Don actually hasn't employed an insecticide since 2015. Yeah. And you're not seeing an impact from a variola dwarf virus perspective, Don. So you have to ask the question why. So these large hedgerows and buffer margins are habitats for the likes of ladybirds, right, which predate aphid. You've got predatory wasps as well. So you have to ask the question, why is Don not being heavily impacted with variola dwarf virus?
Yeah.
And having been in a scheme where we're measuring aphids on the farm and sending them off for analysis, the number of aphids is very small. The number of aphids that could potentially carry the virus are even smaller. And we also inevitably trap other insects. Those numbers are very high. So to use an insecticide, you're going to take out a lot of beneficial insects for the sake of a very small number. And as part of this trial, we look at BYDV infection in the crop, and I have the same 4% infection rate as a farmer who's using maybe 2 insecticides. So again, there's no economic benefit to using it, there's no economic cost to not using it. So to me, it doesn't make sense to try have areas for nature and biodiversity and then come in with an insecticide and wipe them all out, because biodiversity starts with the very smallest microorganisms in the soil, and they're feeding bigger organisms, which are feeding insects, which are feeding birds, which are feeding larger predators. So the food chain starts very small. You have to look after the small things in order to make a habitat in the food chain for the larger animals or birds or insects.
Yeah. And that below ground biodiversity is so important. As you say, you put it really well, it's fundamental to everything else above that. And a lot of the time we talk about the above ground, but it's the below ground, and Don would be strong on that, and Tom Tierney likewise would be particularly strong on that.
Yeah, and having a diverse crop rotation, so we're not just growing cereals, we have legumes, we have brassicas, we have cereals. By sowing cover crops, we're introducing other species which feed different things. Different species of plants are feeding different things in the soils, and then if you have hedgerows with more diversity in it, all these things are all connected. There's no one thing in isolation. All these things feed other parts of it.
Don was telling us he was bought a spade as a present.
Yeah, well, I've always had a spade, but I think you might have seen the video there. There's a bit of tape holding the handle onto it. So yeah, I've been given my wife got me a good quality spade. So it is a very important tool on the farm, just to go out, dig down, see what's going on in the soil, see are there earthworms present, are there signs of microorganisms, and so I think it's referred to as a vest test. But in its most basic form, it's going out, dig down, see what's happening under the soil. That might dictate that, this field is not dry enough to go in and cultivate and to start, so hold off, or do I need to do a remedial action? Sometimes where I dig down with the spade will be dictated by the yield map. You look at the yield map, why is this part of the field not yielding? The spade might tell you why it's not yielding. So yeah, it's a very simple tool. And back, a number of years ago when I was looking into mint hill, a person who had far longer than me told me, forget about spending money on all these fancy implements. The spade is the one that'll the most important one you can have. It's also the cheapest, like they're not very expensive, but they can tell you more. And another thing I was told then was knowing when to do nothing is more important than knowing when you should do something. Knowing when, no, it's not time to go yet, wait, give it more time, it needs to dry more, I need to do this, all that's told you by getting out with a spade.
Yeah, there's continuous decision making, and I suppose there are supports there, John, from a decision support point of view. Could you tell us about some of the supports and tools that are available through the advisory service for farmers who are interested in becoming more sustainable?
I suppose the first one, Mark, and again Don has referred to on numerous occasions, is a nutrient management plan itself, right? And it's not a new technology, it's a very old technology actually. But when I refer to a nutrient management plan, I'd always refer to a detailed plan. It's not something that you pick up and what you take from it. Some farmers may take like how much nitrogen I'm allowed to purchase, how much phosphorus I'm allowed to purchase, and that's all they want to know, right? But in Don's case, Don looks for so much more. Don, he wants to know what he's allowed to purchase. He's perfectly well aware of where his limits are from a nitrogen and phosphorus perspective, right? But he also knows where that should be used to get the best bang for his buck out of it as well. So nutrients are always used extremely efficiently with Don. And again, it's not just NP and K. Don will look at micronutrients as well, the likes of where he's got manganese deficiency issues, where he's got zinc deficiency issues. Don in his head will always have an idea, right, 2 years down the road, John, we need to put a bit of lime on this field. He's totally and utterly aware of his own scenario. Right. And every year Don has always made the point, but I actually take great pleasure out of, he said, the most valuable few hours I spend with you, John, is when I sit down in the office with you and go through the nutrient management plan, what crops are going in, what the phosphorus and potash offtake is going to be with those crops, with an anticipated yield. Look back then as well, so you look back to the previous year, look at how crops yielded, what you had put on, what the offtake with those same crops were, right? Did we have a surplus left after that? Do we have a deficiency left after that? And you may rectify that in the current year then as well. So a nutrient management plan with Don is not simple, it's detailed, but that's what Don looks for, that's what Don gets.
I might go in to do the nutrient management plan with an idea in my head, and like it's not an hour, it's a 2 or 3 or 4 hour process, but having talked to John, who is one step removed, can take a more objective view than I'm looking at it purely up close. Having had that conversation, I might have not completely, but have changed or evolved my plan of what I'm going to do. So yeah, it is a very worthwhile, not just having the plan, but the conversation with your advisor as to what the plan should be.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the decision support tools, I kind of would categorise them into 3 types. You have the programs that we have available to us, so that's the Signpost Advisory Programme. Don is a Signpost demonstration farmer first. You have the ASSA programme, so they're 2 very specific programmes that farmers can get support from. And then you have the decision support tools, which John talked about. I suppose the most recent one is AgNav, which Tillage has been incorporated in, which is a fantastic resource and something we've been building on. And then you have the incentives, and when you look at what Don has done, he's taken advantage of those incentives over the last couple of years, whether it be TAMS, whether it be the straw incorporation, the water EIP and the catch crops, protein crops, acres. So it's about looking at those incentives, and I had to do an article on this recently myself. There's a huge amount of incentives that are there available to farmers, and it's about identifying the ones that are suitable for your farm. So there's plenty of support there and decision support tools. It's a matter of tapping into them really.
I suppose then working with your advisor to understand what is available.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's one as well that we can't forget, Mark, and Don has alluded to it on numerous occasions as well, and that's profitability. So a profit monitor. Like, and I suppose you can look at all the measures that Don has implemented, and you could say, well, how is that affecting his bottom line? Well, I suppose within the discussion group that Don's in, I've actually done in the last week or that, I've done 4 profit monitors within the group, right? And if I'm to look at Don's, all 4 individuals within the group grew wheat, winter wheat in the year gone by. Don's yield of winter wheat is actually the highest among the 4, right? And even when I look at Don's bottom line is extremely favourable in comparison to the remaining 3. So what Don is doing, like, it's not having a negative impact on profitability. If anything, it's having a positive impact.
And even when you're talking about profitability, you know, all tillage farmers are comparing, you know, how many tonnes to the acre did your crop do? Tonnes to the acre doesn't necessarily equate to profitability. For example, on my crops of spring barley, I'm using organic manures, and they're making up approximately 60% of the nitrogen it gets. They're making up about 50% of the P and 100% of the K. And there's a massive saving to be made there. So when you actually look beyond the yield and see how they compare, look at the profitability, if my costs are much lower and my yields are comparable, that's an environmental measure that's making me far more profitable, not just, you know, by reducing my reliance on chemical nitrogen.
And just on that, Don, do you think that there's greater opportunities there for cooperation between livestock and tillage farmers, and how do you think that could be so better supported?
There's definitely massive opportunities there, because ultimately we're all interdependent. I'm producing 60% of what I produce ends up as animal feed, which is required by the livestock sector. They're producing a waste, but they're buying straw off me as well. They're producing a waste product which I want to get onto my farm, as in organic manure, to build organic matter levels in my soil. What I do with a number of farmers in my locality is I will swap straw for dung. So I sell an amount of straw. Not everyone wants to do it, but there's some farmers that say, you take my straw at no cost and give me back the farmyard manure, which I then spread in my field. So it's mutually beneficial. The likes of the poultry manure that I import onto my farm, those chickens are fed, hopefully, fingers crossed, native grain, Irish grain, which I'm producing, and I'm taking the waste product back in order to produce more. So it's like a circular economy. It benefits everybody. You know, any ways that can help farmers work collaboratively for mutual benefits should be encouraged, and if there were support measures or, you know, networks that could be created to do that, I think they will be all the better. It will benefit everybody.
Lots and lots of congratulations coming in, Don, and even we have a viewer in Edinburgh congratulating you on the great work that you're doing. And we have a few particular questions here from our audience, just around insecticide. Does that include not using slug pellets?
I was put up with insecticides. I was talking about, say, insecticides applied with a sprayer. I do reluctantly use slug pellets. Now, I'd be talking probably 1 year in 4 or 5. There are certain scenarios where they can't be avoided. I mean, I have had, there was, for example, in 2024, it would have been the autumn of 23 for harvest 24, I didn't apply any slug pellets on oilseed rape, and out of the 45 acres of oilseed rape that I sowed, only 15 acres made it to harvest. So now, if I had a crop of oilseed rape, this year I got away without using them, but if I had a crop of oilseed rape that was struggling under slug pressure, I would use slug pellets, because, you know, I can see a benefit. I can see, like, if my crop fails, what's the environmental benefit of applying fertiliser and seed to a crop that I'm sowing, having that fail and having to start all over again? So it is a balancing act. Yeah, I use slug pellets, but probably 1 in 4 or 5 years on 20% of my crops.
So maybe there needs to be some research done on natural solutions or nature-based solutions for controlling your...
There was a product there that was supposed to be more environmentally benefited. I can't remember the name of it, but it was taken off the market. I did try to go down that route. If there was something that had an environmental benefit, I do observe the buffers next to water courses and stuff when I apply the pellets. But at the moment, we only have one option. Like I said earlier, it's easier to make the decision on insecticides because I'm not seeing an economic or practical benefit in using them, but at the moment we don't have a better option. Sometimes I will try to say on a crop where you have a lot of slug pressure is a crop of winter wheat after oilseed rape. So if I can go in, say, 3 to 4 to 5 weeks before I'm going to sow the following crop of wheat and mechanically remove that volunteer oilseed rape, which is a food source for the slug. So go in with a disc harrow, remove the volunteers that are feeding that slug population, remove the eggs of the next batch of slugs, I can usually get away with no slug pellets needing to be applied. But sometimes weather or things get in the way and you can't do that, and you just have to, make a decision. What's the best thing I can do in this scenario?
Brilliant. I know you're going to be welcoming people onto your farm sometime next year. We're still finalising dates, but I'm sure that'll be a date that people will want to put in their diaries for the year ahead. And just want to say congratulations once again to you and your wife Gillian and your son Connor. I mean, it's obviously a team effort that it takes to make these things happen.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everybody who has congratulated me and my family over the last 6 or 8 weeks. But it is a family thing. It's not just me and my wife and my kids, it's my parents. I farm with my uncle. So my uncle Jim that I farm with, he's has as much to do with this as I do. Back 20-something years ago, my father signed over the farm to me to let me do it in the way I chose to do it, and has always been supportive of the things. He didn't always agree with the decisions I wanted to make, but he was always supportive. My mother will bring dinners to the field and stuff like that during harvest and all. So yeah, it is a family effort, and we all take a part in it.
Fantastic. And Siobhan, before we finish up, could you tell us about next year's competition and how people could...
I can confirm we have awards programme for next year, so we'll be launching that in the coming weeks, and there'll be an application form will be made available on our website, so details will go out. I'm not sure exactly when we're launching it, but it will be covered fairly extensively. So, and some people might look at the application form and go, geez, there's a lot needed in here. So, call on your advisor or your processor or someone to give you a hand to fill that in. But if you don't put it down in the application form, we can't assess the farm properly, and I think that's really important. So yeah, we will be announcing it in the next couple of weeks for 2026.
Fantastic. And John, thanks for joining us this morning and sharing us the details of Don's farm. And no doubt you'll be getting lots of phone calls for your clients over the next weeks and months. So thanks for joining us this morning.
So that's it for today, and my thanks to Mark, the moderator, Siobhan and John from Teagasc, and a huge congratulations again to Don on winning the award. So finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.